We have rising energy transitions and we have falling energy transitions. Falling energy transitions are going to be your downers, your impacts, your booms. Rising energy transitions are going to be your reverses, your sweeps, your whooshes, your whips, your, did I say risers? Your sweep hits, right? And so rising and falling energy almost always at the downbeat and at your phrase points. What is happening, everybody? This is Dave Croft, and welcome back to another episode of the 52 Qs podcast, your weekly insight into the world of production, library, and sync music. Whether you're brand new to the industry, just curious about what this is all about, or maybe you are a veteran with thousands of placements, I promise you, you are in the right place. As always, a huge word of thanks to the family, friends, and neighbor subscribers of 52 Qs who really keep all of this happening. If you want to learn more about how you can support 52 Qs while also scoring a ton of extra subscriber perks like live streams, workshops, Zoom feedback sessions, pitching to real music libraries, then be sure to tune in a little bit later in today's episode. Speaking of today's episode, I'd like to jump right in. We are talking about effects, or SFX. These are the transitions, the one-shots, things like booms, sweeps, risers, impacts, all of these elements that add a ton of extra energy and polish into a cue. And so what I'd like to do first is unpack how kind of I think about effects, how I organize them. I'm going to bring up my splice and show you how I create multiple collections so that anytime I need an effect, I just go and grab it. And then what I thought would be cool is for me to apply some effects in real time into a recent epic orchestral hip-hop cue that needs them. They have no effects other than maybe some crashes or whatever, but I want to talk about and show you how I do them kind of in real time. So let's talk about effects. There are a few main categories of effects that I use. These sometimes have some synonyms and some other meanings, but how I organize my effects, I have booms, downers, impacts, reverses, risers, sweeps, sweep hits, and whooshes. Booms, downers, impacts, reverses, risers, sweeps, sweep hits, and whooshes. And this is how I organize my effects into Splice. Now, there's something to be said about creating your own effects, and I totally get it. And huge respect for anybody who creates their own effects from scratch. But me personally, I don't necessarily enjoy it. It feels, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of layering, and I have, Splice credits, so why not use them? And so as I've collected these over time in Splice, because you use a credit, I add it to a collection, and eventually you get several that you can kind of keep dipping back into. And so I've created a collection, and parenthetically, I really wish Splice would update their app. Like I want to be able to drag this, but I can't. I'm kind of locked in, and so I can't create folders here in my collections. So what I've had to do is use abbreviations before the collection to organize them on in some way. So let's first start with booms. Okay, booms are typically sub-frequency hits, or they're a flavor of impacts, but they're not super transient, and they sound really, really good at the opening of a cue, depending on how kind of intense it is. At the very, very end, if you need a final hit, we're looking to add low-end thump and low-end kind of energy without adding a lot of transient energy. So here are some of the booms that I've collected, And you'll notice that some of them are a little bit more transient than others, but in general, these are booms. Yeah, you can see some of them are really, really subtle. There are these low-end energy thwomps that are really meant to be felt more than they are meant to be heard. So those are my booms. Now, related to booms are impacts. So what's the difference between a boom and an impact? For me, impacts are significantly more transient, and we're going to hear several of these impacts, which are claps that have long reverbs, long release tails, and these work really, really good at phrase points and kind of like every other phrase point. So they're like a boom, but they're a boom with more transients, and they layer really, really nicely with other impacts and other booms. So here are some of the impacts that I have. See, a lot of these are like claps or clacks. Now, from a mixing perspective, I almost always will give a boom the low end, which might mean I have to do some side chaining or some dynamic EQing or something so that the boom can stay in the low end, but also we're balancing, kick drums or bass in the mix. But impacts, not always, especially when I pair them with a boom. But because these are meant to be more transient, they are meant to add a huge downbeat at the top of a phrase or at the button or at the end of a stinger or something like that, then they don't necessarily need a ton of low end, especially when you start layering them. You have to be really, really careful because all of these sounds are gonna have a lot of low end baked into them. So you have to be really careful to make sure to EQ everything so that the low end doesn't totally get away from you. So those are the impacts. And again, several more of these. And when I buy one on Splice, I add it to the collection, and I tend to use similar types. And just parenthetically, you can mix these or sort these in Splice by most recent, by most relevant, most popular, or random. And I find that really, really helps to sort them by random, because you might find yourself using the exact same ones if they're always at the top of the list. So yeah, so as you can see, impacts are significantly more transient. So related to booms and impacts are downers. And downers happen at really, really large phrase points, typically coming out of a section, and then we are going into another section. So these are song section markers. And they have downward energy. They're kind of like the opposite of a riser, and we'll talk about riser here. And there are kind of noisy downers. There are like lasery downers. There are subby downers. So here is some downers. Here are some downers. A little sub drop. All right. Yeah, that one's a little lasery. Another sub drop. and another little lasery. So you can see they're related to impacts. They're typically pretty transient, but they have falling energy and they tend to go on and kind of on. All right, so those are booms, impacts, and downers. So these are going to be on the downbeat of a phrase or on the downbeat of the beat. Okay, the rest of the effects that I use are going to be effects which help build energy, build tension into a downbeat, or it could be into a cliffhanger or into a stop. And in the demo that I'm going to show you here in a second, we will be doing these. And they're basically different kind of levels of energy and how intense the energy gets. So a reverse is typically a cymbal sound or a white noise sound or something like that that sounds like it's been reversed. And that's going into a cliffhanger, like almost like a suction kind of thing. Right, you can tell it's rising energy, but it sounds reversed. Here's another reverse cymbal. That one actually has a little reverb tail on it. And that is a reverse into an impact, into a crash. Okay, so these are typically pretty short and have reverse energy. Whether if it's a crash cymbal that's reversed, then it sounds backwards. If there are rhythmic elements, the rhythmic elements sound backwards. So those are reverses, not to be confused with risers. And risers are building energy. They're not always reversed, but they're typically much longer. They can have pitched elements to it. They can have rhythmic elements to it, but it's rising, 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 rising. That one has a little bonus impact. So here's a 30-second riser. Big, long release tail. You hear the pitch bending here. All right, so risers, or let me back up into reverses. I use reverses into a stop or into a cliffhanger, into a moment that needs to sound like it comes to an abrupt stop. I call those cliffhangers, like almost like a suction, a vacuum. That's when I will use reverses. I use risers generally at big song section transitions, like going out of the A section into a B section, out of the B section into the A section, and maybe the last A section going into the final button or the final stinger. Long, it's building tension, building energy until a final payoff, which is typically an impact, a boom, or a downer. Okay, so we have rising energy, and we have kind of falling energy. Falling energy are going to be those impacts, downers, booms, rising energy are going to be your risers, your reverses, your sweeps, your sweep hits, and your whooshes. All right, so let's talk about sweeps. Sweeps are kind of like risers and kind of like reverses in that they're building energy, but they also have tailing energy on the other end. Let me show you what I mean. And you can hear sweeps don't have a really defined, like transient midpoint. I mean, you can see if you look at the waveform here, you can absolutely see it, and you'll need to do that when you line it up in your DAW. Yeah, see, that one could also be considered a downer. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and let's put this in our downer because it's a little bit of both. All right, so there's a sweep that isn't a reverse because it's not necessarily a reversed sound. All right, so those are sweeps. I use sweeps at phrase markings or larger phrase points. And when we look into the DAW and I start plugging these in, I'm going to talk about kind of my concept on how I scale them and how to use multiples to create a sense of building energy by stacking these effects. All right, so those are sweeps. Related to sweeps, which are, kind of related to reverses with a non-transient downbeat, are whooshes. And whooshes are like more subtle sweeps. Typically a little shorter. And if you get them really short, you can almost think of them as whips. Like that. That sounds more like a whip. I don't have my own whip category, but you can see they're kind of like sweeps, but a little bit more subdued and shorter. Okay. Now you take a sweep and bake in an impact into the sound itself, and then you get sweep hits. Yeah, some of these are so short, I could about call them whip hits. All right, so those are my sweep hits. I use sweep hits, again, to push the momentum of the cue forward at phrase points. I use nearly all of these at phrase points. So with that said, let's look at a cue that I have worked up in the past. It's been a couple of months, but I need to add some additional effects to this. This is called intensities. I totally copped that from Wayne's World. And this is kind of a big epic hip hop cue. Interestingly enough, this that is a mead bottle that I have right over there, just like a bottle of mead, which is like honey wine. Really, really cool bottle, and I played it, I think, with ink pens. And then I took one shots and made a little instrument out of it. So this is a hip hop cue that is in ABA form. We're about to go into the B section, into the breakdown. All right, so that was Intensity in 10 Cities. And the reason there are no effects on this already is because I typically save this for last. Because getting into the weeds and layering in all of the effects when we have so many to choose from can take a while. So I save it for last, but I want to walk you through my thinking here. All right, so we have a larger ABA structure here. And so I know that these big song sections are going to need transitional energy in and out of them. So I know that going into the B section, I'm going to need a lot of energy. I'm going to need a lot of push because I'm about to pull the energy back. And so I want it like a wave crashing on the shore. So I know I'm going to need big energy there. And going back into the A section, I know that I am going to want to add big energy here. And then finally, big energy into the final downbeat, into the button. All right, so using the ABA form, A, breakdown, A. So the B section is just like the A section with some things removed. So those are my big tent poles that I know I'm going to have to hit. The other thing I want to consider is when we have some reverse moments, we have some stoppage in the cue, like coming up right here. Right, and this is something that happens quite frequently in hip hop. It also works well for like trailers. You have some stoppage and leaving a couple of notes by themselves. Okay, so I know that on this beat right here, which is going to be like beat 3, I need to reverse into it. I don't need an impact on the downbeat of beat 3, but I am going to want to put an impact on the following measure with maybe a really fast whoosh or a sweep hit or a whap, just to add extra energy into it. Or anytime the time stops, we've got 3 of those. So I know I'm going to have a reverse there into pickups into bar 17, pickups into bar 41, and pickups into bar 57. I've got 3 of those that I know I'm going to have to hit. So we've got our big tent poles, song sections. We've got smaller reverse moments. And then I think about the phrase. For cues, especially like this, big kind of sports cues, we want to have something pushing energy into every phrase, but we can't just use the same reverse or the same sweep kind of over and over. It's going to get really, really repetitive. So what I'm going to do is picking up into the downbeat, I'm going to add a little whoosh. The melody comes in here after bar 8, so the downbeat of bar 9, and so this is a moment that needs to be emphasized. So I am going to create a little reverse, or not a reverse, a sweep going into this downbeat and put an impact on it to really punctuate that downbeat. Then we have our reverse. A few bars later, we're going to punctuate that downbeat. Then we're going to punctuate the following downbeat of the phrase. And then I know we're going to have a big riser into the breakdown. The breakdown is going to have a little reverse of the vacuum moment. And so I know we're going to have in bar 41 here, we're going to have another impact, maybe a sweep, maybe a whoosh, or maybe just an impact. Big energy coming out of the breakdown into the final A section. This phrase, the final phrase, I'm going to have another impact, maybe a whoosh. And you're going to see that these are going to get denser and denser as the cue progresses so that the transitional energy picks up momentum, just like we've done with the arrangement. And we have like multiple layers, we've got octaves. And so the arrangement itself is expanding. So we want our transitions to expand with them. So to recap, I've got my big tent poles. My biggest tent poles are going to be into the breakdown, out of the breakdown, into the button. My second biggest kind of tent pole is going to be introducing the melody. The other thing I really need to make sure I grab is putting reverses into any of the beats where things are going to drop out. And then finally, making sure that we've essentially put some kind of transitional element without being way too heavy-handed on each phrase. And so before I even start dragging things in, I know exactly what I need. So how do we want to do this? Let's start from the beginning. Let's add a little whoosh here at the beginning, and I am going to insert an extra bar here. All right, so it's pretty intense. And so let's grab a fast sweep. Probably, do I need a sweep hit? Need something pretty quick. Yeah, I like that one. So let's drag it over. We're going to drop it in. We are going to manually line this up. Yeah, there we go. Now, I already have 808s and everything, and I'm not going to do this with every single one of these, but we will see all that kind of low end. So let's clean that up a little bit. Let's pull out some of the low end. While we're at it, let's throw got some reverb on here. That's going to help smooth it out, especially if we have some of the end of the audio tail kind of cuts off a little bit. Let's listen to it. Now, without it, it's okay, but with it, here there's a little kind of in there. All right, so I am going to call this, I'm going to create the lane sweep hits. And I'm going to put all of my sweep hits in this lane. And it might be multiple sweep hits, but I'm going to use just one lane for sweep hits. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and color it red. All right, coming up into the next phrase. So let's go back. Let's do one other thing. Let's add a boom on the downbeat. So we have a sweep hit and a boom. Let's see what that sounds like with it. It's a little intense, so I'm just going to pull down the volume. Yeah, I dig that. And let me show you how I would create a sidechain on this. I am going to add a Pro Q3 here. And so I am going to sidechain. My audio is from booms. Let's add a node right there. I don't need that node. I'm going to pull this down. All right, so that makes it a dynamic EQ, but if I click that little guy right there, I'm adding the sidechain. Now it's getting out of the way. The boom hits, it pushes the 808. That's what I've put this on. I've added this EQ on the 808 so that when the booms hit, it pushes the 808 out of the way. So now we are coming up into our melody. We need to mark this as a moment. So let's add an impact. Let's try this one as a nice juicy release tail. So let's drop it right there. I'm sure I'm going to be adding multiple layers, so I'm going to call this impact 1. Turn down the volume because I know it's going to be loud. Let's get a little sweep into this. Don't necessarily need a sweep hit. Oh yeah, I dig that one. So let's bring it over. All right, so this is going to be sweep. Let's see what we got from the top. Yep. Let's add another boom here, but not the exact same boom. So let's find a more subtler boom. Yeah, I dig that one. All right. We're going to put it on the boom lane, which means that when it hits, it's going to push the very, very low of the 808 out of the way. All right, we're coming up into a reverse. All right, so we've got a reverse moment happening right here. So I know that I'm going to need to reverse right there into beat 3 of that measure. Let's go back over. Let's go into our reverses. Yep. And I don't have to like audition it a ton. I just, if it works like 85% of the way there, then use it. And then later, if you still notice the 15% that doesn't work, then you can change it out. But my guess is you're not really going to notice, and it will sound fine. All right, let's add a little sweep impact here. All right, let's just see what this sounds like. Oh yeah, that's cool. No, let's find another impact. Let's use that guy. All right, put the impact. All right, clean up the low end. While we're at it, let's add the boom from the top. All right, we need an impact or something right there. Let's look at. All right, that'll work. We're going to put this on the same impact lane right there. So again, we've got a little whoosh going into the downbeat. Little boom. Then the next phrase, we have a boom, really transient clap impact, and little reverse. Then we have a reverse going into our break. Next phrase, we just have the impact. All right, let's make these red. There we go. All right, so now we are coming up into our breakdown. So we're gonna need a bunch of riser energy. We're gonna need a ton of riser energy. So let's look at a riser. Yeah, I dig that. So let's pull it in. And I'm gonna zoom in here and line it up with the downbeat. Then, yeah, it really hits it. All right, so let's look at our impacts and let's bring in this impact. We have a sonic boom. Let's use that sonic boom. And let's go ahead and put a downer while we're at it. Let's put a downer. Yeah, I like that guy right there. So we are going to put that right on the downbeat. And again, so I'm using the track titles as a form of organization, so that if I need to add another impact, I need to add another hit, then I can layer them. And let's go ahead and do another impact. We're going to call this impact 2. Oh, I like that one. Not quite as aggressive. All right, with the boom. With the reverse into the trailer hit. All right, coming up into the reverse. We're gonna go one more phrase into the boom. I'm gonna clean up the low end because the only sound that's really getting the low end is going to be the booms. All right, we've got another reverse coming up because we can see the stop. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm actually not going to put it on the downbeat. I'm looking at the piano and the bass and when that's hitting. If I want to really emphasize 1, 2, and, then I can reverse into that syncopated moment. So let's find a reverse. Yep, that'll work. Let's drop it in. All right, and so now we're gonna come in nice and strong here. Let's pull up, let's see what this impact sounds like. That's a little intense, let's bring it down. All right, let's find another boom. Need something a little bit more subtle. Yep, that'll work. Okay, so I'm thinking going through the next phrase. Let's have an impact. Okay, all right, so we're reintroducing the melody here. So we need to make sure that this sounds prepared for. Because as it is right now, even though I wrote this, and even though I've heard this so many times, I kind of lost sight the fact that, hey, I'm about to reintroduce my melody and it sounds like it's not really prepared for it. So let's add a riser. And I want to use a different tool, actually. I am going to be using Native Instruments Rise and Hit. I know that many of you folks have this. So let's load up a contact instrument. Rise and Hit is a somewhat older plugin from Native Instruments. And if you've not used it before, it essentially adds riser energy as well as impact energy into a time-synced contact instrument. And I have different types of risers and hits. So let's just start with orchestral. And just bowed to bird. This is the first one, and I'll kind of show you how this works. And it is tempo synced. So I have the riser half of it, and then it hits a downbeat, but I also have just the downbeats. Let's find another one. Yeah, there we go, that works. We're gonna make this 8 beats. And so let's add it right here. All right, so that's going to be Rise and Hit, and it works really, really well. I mean, it really does. At this point, I can leave it as the contact instrument, or I can bounce it into place, and it will create a riser, which is perfectly synced, perfectly in time, that now I can use as needed. God, do you see how much more that feels like something new is happening? Like, let me turn off this riser. I mean, it sounds okay, but now let me unmute it and you can really hear what I'm talking about. Yeah, all right, so that is another riser. So we're gonna put this right there. And while we're at it, let's find another. And let's, instead of orchestra, let's do lifters. Oh, I like that a lot. All right, so let's track it. Let's go ahead and bounce it into place. So now we have that riser, and I'm gonna go ahead and delete Rise and Hit. This is gonna be a riser 2 because I'm gonna layer this riser for the final downbeat. So coming into our second A section. And let's get a bigger impact on the downbeat here. We've got another reverse coming up. So let's just grab these, move them over. All right, but we definitely need more impacts. Let's copy these over. And just for good measure, let's add a boom halfway through the phrase. And let's add an impact halfway through the phrase. Because we want to make it more intense as we go. To the final. All right, into that final downbeat. So let's get our impacts. Let's grab all of these. Let's get our downer. Let's find another downer. Yep, that'll work. Yeah, it just keeps going. So I'll fix that. We're gonna put that downer right on the downbeat, and I'm gonna fade that so it's not quite as obnoxious. All right, I do need a big riser. I don't know if I want to use the same riser, but let's see. This is the same riser that led into it. All right, so let's see how our two risers interact. And then it fades out from there. Let me change something really quick. I don't need that guy, don't need that. Just deleting some things. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and create a track stack. We're gonna call all of this SFX. And so now I can add a little bit more reverb, or they all kind of sound like they're all in the same room. And I can pull them all down together. Yeah. All right, coming up into our breakdown, a lot of riser energy. Here, I just want to play that. I'm going to mute the effects and listen to the energy going into the breakdown. I mean, it works, but listen to the difference. I'm gonna let it keep going. Yeah, let's add a little whoosh setting this up, especially since it's so long. Yeah, I dig that. All right, reintroducing the melody. Oh, that could be even louder. All right, let's put a higher impact on here. What do we have so far? Yeah, let's put a Yeah, it's pretty aggressive, but we'll back it down. Yeah. Yep. Into the final. So again, you can see that as the cue progresses, more and more effects are being layered. But starting with your big tent poles, your big song sections, and then you fill in around those to make sure that there is always energy and there's these transitions which are propelling things forward. Remember, we have rising energy transitions and we have falling energy transitions. Falling energy transitions are going to be your downers, your impacts, your booms. Rising energy transitions are going to be your reverses, your sweeps, your whooshes, your whips, your, did I say risers? Your sweep hits, right? And so rising and falling energy almost always at the downbeat and at your phrase points. So hopefully that was helpful for you. And hopefully it was helpful for you seeing that kind of in real time. But yeah, what did you think? Again, was that helpful? I really, really hope so. So if you have any questions or comments, please let me know in the comments below. If you do things differently or if you have some more to add, I absolutely want to hear from you on that. So we are going to take a really super quick break, and I'm going to tell you all about how you can join 52 Cues. We'll be right back. Every week I talk about how this episode and the podcast and the community, the channel, would not be possible without the amazing support of our family, friends, and neighbors, subscribers of 52 Cues, who do pay their actual real-life money to keep all of this going. And in addition to being thriving members of the community, as well as supporting me and Shannon and everything that we're doing here, they also receive extra perks like live streams, workshops, Zoom feedback sessions, hundreds and hundreds of hours of video archives, weekly cue breakdowns, production music almanac, living ebook, and the opportunities to submit to real music libraries. Now, it's free to join 52 Cues. You can just go to 52cues.com and sign up, be a member of the community. We would love to have you. It will always be free to join the community. But if you've been watching, or if maybe this is your first time, but if you're wondering, is there a way to kind of level up my production music skills in the industry, meeting like-minded, super friendly, very generous composers? Then why don't you think about subscribing? Memberships start at around $4 a month, and we would love to have you. Again, that's 52cues.com. Thank you so much, past alternate version Dave. Really, really appreciate it. You know who else I appreciate? I appreciate you, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to the audio on the go. Just know that I really, really appreciate you being with me today. I know you have a ton of options out there. There are so many tutorials and folks talking about the sync industry, so the fact that you spent some of your day here with me means a lot. By the way, if you're listening to the audio on the go, I hope that whole episode made sense. I know there was a real big visual component to it, and so hopefully you were able to follow along. But that is going to do it for me this week. You definitely want to tune in next week, where I'm going to be talking about originality. What does being original really mean? And where's the line between original and unique? And does the production music industry even need originality? And if it doesn't, well, what does that mean for us? And so that's what we're going to be talking about all next week. So you definitely want to tune in for that. And if you want to make sure that you get notified when episodes hit YouTube, then be sure to subscribe. And while you're at it, hit that thumbs up. It really, really does help things out. Or if you're listening to the audio, follow it. And while you're there, why don't you think about maybe a 5-star review? That would help us out here as well. But I hope you had an amazing week, and I am filled with confidence that your next week is going to be even more amazing. How do I know that? Because I know, trust, and believe that the universe has amazing plans just for you. Until next time, peace. The 52Qs podcast is copyright 2024 818 Studios, all rights reserved. The music played on the podcast is copyright of their respective owners and is used with permission and for educational purposes only. For more information, including joining the community or becoming a member subscriber of 52Qs, head over to 52qs.com.